How many of you are familiar with Don Bosco? I'm talking about the person, not the high school in Ramsey, New Jersey. For those of you who may not be familiar with Don Bosco, the person, Don Bosco was an Italian priest who lived back in the 1800s, who had a real gift for attracting young people to God. He founded an order of priests and brothers known as the Salesians, who dedicate themselves to working with youth. In addition to his gift for working with young people, Don Bosco also received several other extraordinary gifts from God. He could read people's souls, he could predict the future accurately, and he had many prophetic dreams. This afternoon, I'd like to share with you one of Don Bosco's prophetic dreams. As I tell it to you, use your imagination and try to picture it as vividly as you can. In his dream, Don Bosco saw a large ship sailing on the ocean towards the shore. The ship was caught in a bad storm. The rain was heavy, the winds were strong, and the waves were high. At the front of the ship was the captain, dressed all in white, doing his best to steer the ship into port despite all the turbulence. The weather wasn't the only challenge he was facing either. All around the ship were small enemy boats attacking it and trying to make it sink. They fired cannonballs, they threw incendiary bombs, and they repeatedly rammed into the ship with their sharp prows. Coming up out of the water close to the shore were two large columns, just far enough apart from each other for the ship to pass through. On the top of one of the columns was a large white communion host with the words, "Salvation of the Faithful," written beneath it. On top of the other column was a statue of the Virgin Mary with the words, "Help of Christians," written beneath it. The captain knew that if he could only steer the ship between those two columns, it wouldn't sink. Every time the enemy boats succeeded in creating a gash in the side of the big ship, a gust of wind would immediately come from the two columns and patch up the gash. At one point in the dream, one of the enemy boats fired a shot which took down the captain. All of the sailors on the enemy boats began to cheer and celebrate, when almost immediately another captain, also dressed in white, rose up to take the place of the one who had just been killed. The new captain fixed his gaze on the white communion host and the statue of Mary, and despite the fierce struggle against the weather and the attacks of the enemy boats, he was finally able to pull the ship between those two columns and into safe harbor. The moment the ship was anchored to the two columns, the enemy boats self-destructed and sank, and a deep peace came over the waters. When Don Bosco woke up and shared the dream with his closest confidants, he explained that the ship was a symbol of the Catholic Church sailing through history. The bad weather and the enemy boats represented all of the difficulties and the attacks the church has undergone throughout time, both from without and from within. And the captain in white, of course, stood for the Pope. As soon as a pope dies or is killed, the church's enemies may rejoice, but God always raises up a new pope to continue to guide the church over the seas of time. And as the dream shows, no matter how much damage is done to the ship of the church, as long as the ship stays close to Jesus in the Eucharist and to the Blessed Virgin Mary, it will never sink. just as Jesus promised that the gates of hell would never prevail against his Catholic Church. At the end of his explanation of the symbols in the dream, Don Bosco said to his listeners, "Only two means are left to save the Church amidst so much confusion: devotion to Mary Most Holy and frequent communion, doing our best to practice them and having them practiced everywhere and by everybody." If you'd like to read more about this dream or about Don Bosco's many other dreams, you can find it all in the book, The 40 Dreams of St. John Bosco. What is the link between Don Bosco's dream and today's readings? Well, in today's gospel, Peter feels a lot like the ship in Don Bosco's dream. He's walking on the water towards Jesus when all of a sudden he's frightened by the winds and is in danger of sinking. Thankfully, he doesn't drown. After just a few seconds, Jesus reaches down and pulls him up out of the water. The most important detail of this gospel for all of us is the direction of Peter's gaze. As long as he's looking at Jesus, he's able to walk on the water. But the minute he takes his eyes off of Jesus to look at the winds, he begins to sink. And in that little detail, we have one of the most important lessons for our lives as Christians on the journey to heaven. If you keep your eyes fixed on Jesus in the storms of life, you will never sink, no matter how strong the winds may be. How exactly do we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus? It's nice to say keep your eyes fixed on Jesus, but what does that mean? If we don't explain further, we risk that it becomes something vague and something we can't live out. So how exactly do you keep your eyes fixed on Jesus when you're a Catholic? It's not like he's physically in front of us like he was for Peter, and you can look at him in the eyes the exact same way Peter did. So how do people in today's day and age keep their eyes fixed on Jesus so as not to sink? Well, the answer to that question comes right out of Don Bosco's dream. You see, the ship in the dream, that was certainly a symbol of the Catholic Church, but it's also a symbol of each one of us as individuals going through life. And just like the ship, as long as we stay close to the Eucharist and to Mary, we will never sink. Let me repeat that so it sinks in. The concrete way that we keep our eyes on Jesus in today's day and age is by staying as close as possible to the Eucharist and the Blessed Virgin Mary. Some ways to stay close to the Eucharist. Go to Mass every Sunday, even on vacation and when your weekend schedule is already jam-packed. For a true Catholic, to miss Sunday Mass even one time in your life without a very, very excellent reason should be unthinkable. Receive Holy Communion as often as possible, even during the week if you can. If there is a marriage situation that is preventing you from receiving the Eucharist, be proactive in resolving it as soon as possible with the help of a priest. Make spiritual communions when it's truly impossible to receive a sacramental communion. Make frequent visits to the Blessed Sacrament by stopping into Catholic churches and spending a few minutes in prayer before the tabernacle. And participate in Eucharistic adoration, which we have right here at Sacred Heart every Friday from 8 to 9, and which I sincerely hope to expand. Those are some of the ways to stay close to the Eucharist. Some ways to stay close to Mary would be: pray the Rosary every day. This is the best way to stay close to Mary, and it's especially powerful when you do it together as a family. Keep an image of Mary in your home and speak to her spontaneously throughout the day. Pray the Angelus every day at 12 o'clock. Consecrate yourself and all the newborn babies in your family to Mary at their baptism. Make occasional mini pilgrimages to local Marian shrines or churches dedicated to the Blessed Mother. And if God blesses you with the opportunity and the resources, make a major pilgrimage, even only once in your life, to a major Marian shrine like Lourdes, Fatima, or Guadalupe. Mary never brings us to herself. She always brings us to her Son, Jesus. These are the traditional ways of staying close to the Eucharist and the Virgin Mary that the Church encourages all Catholics to practice. Most of our grandmothers did all of these things with great devotion. And yet, oddly and sadly, in recent years, most of these practices have been completely forgotten or neglected by younger generations of Catholics. That just goes to show you that our grandmothers were much wiser and much holier than we are. It is high time to rediscover and reincorporate all of these practices into our lives and to help the people around us to do the same. Life would go so much more smoothly if we did. Remember what Don Bosco said about devotion to the Eucharist and Our Lady. If we want to stay afloat, we need to do our best to practice them and to have them practiced everywhere and by everybody. Are you going through any storms in your life right now? Do you maybe feel like you are about to sink? Many people feel that way these days, and you may be one of them. If you aren't, get ready. The sea is never calm forever. Whether you're going through a storm right now, or if a storm is brewing on the horizon, take a lesson today from St. Peter and St. John Bosco. Keep your eyes fixed on Jesus by drawing as close as possible to the Eucharist and our Blessed Mother. If you do, not only will you survive the storms of life, you'll thrive through the storms of life. Not only will you not sink, you will even be able to walk on water.